Dear valued listeners, I'm excited to welcome you to a special episode because this happens to be the first day of the 8th month of year 2025. The program series is still Fiscal Interventions and Economic Growth on Amagate Radio Communications, and I still remain Shono. Last episode, that's last week, we had the privilege of inviting a distinguished and outstanding scholar, a financial expert in person of Dr. Yusuf Shoyebo, who shared a lot of valuable insights on the new tax reform bill signed into law by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on the 26th of June 2025. Well, for those of our listeners who could not listen to it, we'll give a brief highlight of what we discussed. Dr. Shoyebo agreed that this reform was a great step in the right direction. In fact, in his opinion, this step is long. This reform, this bill just passed into law, is long overdue. In fact, it said the tax to GDP ratio in Nigeria is about 10%, which is far below the global average. This new tax reform, according to him, would broaden the tax net. One, he said it would allow inclusion of online digital platforms, and he also looked at the various benefits that this will bring to the economy as a whole. His taxing volume and capacity, and even consolidated 4% levy will be applicable to large firms, and for small firms, we talk about the small, medium, the micro, small, medium enterprises. And we always say that these MSMEs in some economies, in some continents, contribute about 90% to of employment levels. So if we have a sector that contributes about 90% of the jobs, definitely any government will want to bring in policies that will create the right environment for such enterprises to thrive. And Nigeria is no exception to that. And this tax law will come as a breathing space for smaller firms, because smaller firms act. And the way Dr. Shoyebo couched was what I loved a lot. He said this reform is MSME friendly, very friendly to the micro, small and medium enterprises, because you would have zero VAT on vitals, on essential goods like food, shelter, electricity. And if you look at these three components, this resonates with the Maslow hierarchy of needs for the common man out there, for majority of the citizens out there. Once you can take care of my food, you can take care of my shelter, you can take care of my security, definitely you are already solving my basic needs of life. And this is one of the things that this tax reform seeks to ensure for the citizens of Nigeria. And of course, another good news is that if you are earning below around 840,000 annually, that is, we looked at about 70,000 monthly. That was what we used hypothetically. Definitely for somebody like that, you will fall within that tax, that income range, you are exempted from paying taxes. This is good news, for it. Okay. And of course, we also looked at the VAT, the revenue sharing formula. It has also noticed that only been reviewed. 50% will be shared equally, but 30% according to derivation and 20% according to population. And this, it shows a listening government. It shows a government that is taking policies based on data, based on facts, empirical data. And these are many more what we shared about last week. And Dr. Shoyebo also looked at the role of technology in this phase. How will technology enable us? Technology is not a nice to have, it's a must have, it's an enabler, because it's going to help to do what we call audit trail and integration of the national tax data. Then it helps to track performance. And of course, Dr. Shiribo also mentioned the issue of accountability. It enables proper accountability. And of course, we have the informal sector in Nigeria, which constitutes a large part of of the total business environment that would have wide all get into the remote. Of course, I know we'll get them eventually. The use of artificial intelligence. Oh Lord, please, if you have missed out what we discussed last week, I enjoyed myself. It was engaging, it was robust. I promise our listeners that Dr. Sheba has a whole lot inside of him that will be bringing on board last episode, and I got feedback from those who sent the messages. Thank you so much. We are in for another roller coaster with Dr. Toye, but today, so today what we'll be doing is to be continuing our discussion by taking deeper look at other perspectives relevant to this subject matter. So thank you so much, Dr. Shoyeba, for
thank you, ma'am,
accepting to join us today to share further insights on this very burning issue. Thank you, Dr. Shoyeba, for accepting to join us. We appreciate you, and I'm also staying back, sitting tight to enjoy another impactful session from you, sir.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Okay, so I'll just dive into it. Okay, so I'll start by asking the first question. Do you think this new tax reform addresses the issues of multiple taxation and inefficiency in tax administration in Nigeria?
Thank you very much. Decisively, yes. This is because the new tax reform marks a decisive shift towards clarity and coordination.
Okay.
By addressing multiple taxation and streamlining tax administration, it signifies Nigeria's intent to move from chaotic collection to coordinated compliance. This has been one of the biggest bottlenecks for businesses in Nigeria due to the existence of multiple and overlapping taxes at federal, state, and local levels. This system offers the following. That means the new reform.
Okay.
Unifying various levies such as education tax, police fund, tech levy into a single developmental levy. It also empowers the Joint Revenue Board to harmonize tax collection across various tiers of government, as well as introduce what we call a single taxpayer identification number, as well as a central digital portal that serves for registration, filing, and payment of tax. This innovative solution creates a clearer and more predictable tax environment, and it is believed that over time it will enhance Nigerian ranking in terms of ease of doing business as well as fiscal transparency. Let me add this, that the establishment of Nigerian Revenue Service is intended to unify tax administration using or leveraging on the digital tax system that will enhance efficiency and facilitate prompt compliance tracking, which is in line with international best practice as well as the OECD Forum on Tax Administration Guideline. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Shoyeba. And I like what you said, that we are going to move from chaotic collection. Whether like it or not, there has been an issue, the issue of multiple taxation. We have different tiers of government, various levy, taxing the same entity. That has been an issue for over decades. I learned about it. I remember when I was in school, was the course we did. That was over 20 something years ago. Now I'm taking the same course. We are still teaching them the issues of multiple taxation. So I'm more than eager to see us solve this issue, of multiple taxation and the inefficient tax administration in Nigeria. And I like what you have said, that you are going to move from chaotic collection to coordinated compliance. And yes, I look forward to what you said about the JRP being able to join revenue, board being able to harmonize taxes across various tiers of government. And you mentioned the central portal and the single taxpayer identification number. Now, I believe that all of this will help the ease of doing business in Nigeria. But if we're going to look at it, do you think ease of doing business ranking where we are right now would improve considerably as a result of this tax reform? In your opinion, do you think that would help?
Yes, with time, definitely, because we will experience what we call fiscal transparency. Will experience what we call as government will remove that have hitherto frustrated most business or eat deep into their profit and survival strength that has forced most business out of the circle. So with the tax to pay, they can budget, they can plan, as well as cater for aspects of their business with adequate planning and strategic movement that will sustain them in the long run.
Okay, well, yeah, I see your point. I thank you so much, sir. I see your point, Dr. Shoyebo, that yes, fiscal transparency. I thank you so much, sir. I see your point, Dr. Shoyebo, that yes, fiscal transparency, and again, it's also important for for organization to be able to plan, and also exemption would also help them, get more funds because it's going to improve their profitability levels. Okay, thank you so much for that, Dr. Shoyebo. Now, some people like us here have concerns around some of the reforms. I want to mention like the value added tax. You also mentioned it in the last episode last week. The value added tax remains at 7.5% right now. Okay, but there are projections that it could increase to about 15% by year 2030. That's about 5 years away from the projections. Now, meanwhile, we have also seen targeted exemptions, such as food, rent, fuel, and also we have also seen in this same law, we have also seen a modified revenue sharing formula. Now, my concerns and some concerns of a lot of people out there is that how might this carve out and allocation adjustment affect both federal, state equity, and inflation?
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so
ordinarily, everything is a plan. It is part of a preparation towards align with ECOWAS value-added tax harmonization guideline. But the exemption creates mixed effects. This is because it offers shelter to vulnerable population from price shocks, especially in terms of food and fuel. It also narrowed down the value-added tax base, which will or could undercut revenue mobilization, as well as introduce some distortion in the planning process. Additionally, the modified revenue sharing formula that though is expected to increase or improve fiscal equity, but the effectiveness will depend on the extent of transparency and capability of this. Otherwise, it can lead to some inflationary pressure that will be of concern to all citizens in the country. So ordinarily, if VAT is increased without parallel productivity or gain or targeted subsidies, it could fuel cost push inflation, especially in those sectors like transport or housing sector. According to Nigerian Bureau of Statistics report 2024, inflation, even though is a major challenge, is often arise from minor adjustments such as the VAT that we are proposing that will create a ripple effect across on consumer prices, and we should not try another problem so that we will not end up in a state of social that when it's able to fill a hole, we are not solving problem, we are just promoting or pushing forward the doom days. Thank you.
Okay, Thank you so much, Dr. Sheyebo. I like the way you put the analogy. You don't dig up a hole to fill another hole, because definitely there's going to be that hole that still has to be filled up later. And again, the issue of the ripple effect, because if you look at it from what you even said, yes, this is the right step in the right direction, but also the fact of fiscal accountability. Now, also I want to look at, and I know the fact that for inflationary pressure, if the VAT increases, it's going to push up cost of production, and that's why we talked about the cost push kind of inflation in economics. Now, how do we balance this? Because whether I like it or not, when it increases, and inflation goes up, does it not still come back to the common man? So how do we balance this ripple effect that could have multiplier effect on the economy?
That is why there should be adequate control. Lately the government has been accused of financial immaturity. And what does that mean? They are trying to address disequilibrium in the economy, but they exempted themselves from being affected by it. And remember, in the previous episode, we discussed about, can the citizen trust the government to be sure that they will do what they claim. So if truly they are trying to create a sustainable future in the economy, then it must be such that we will not create a problem while solving a problem. And it is very easy. The flow of money should be controlled.
Okay.
And that is one critical function of the central bank. So the ideology that the amount of money outside the control of CBN is monumental compared to what is within the formal sector should be brought to the minimum level. And that is the essence of monetary policies, so that they will adjust the short-term gap that can exist that this policy may not actually capture in full. So if you want to look at it, fiscal policy, monetary policy must come in to complement each other. And that is why we adjust the monetary MPR every month to forestall, to correct any misalignment in the economy. But the moment the government is taxing the central populace and they are engaging on a free spend era, then they will not solve the problem. Instead, they will be pushing the common man to the unknown region, which will not be well for them in every aspect, whether in terms of political prosperity, or in terms of the popularity, or in terms of trust of the common man. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Weber, for that very deep insight. From what you have said, it's safe to say that what you are looking at is that there will be financial maturity from the part of the government, that fiscal interventions are beautiful, they are laudable, but fiscal interventions alone will not curb inflationary pressure. From what you have said, am I right? Yes. In fact, monetary economics, I always say that inflation is a monetary phenomenon. According to Friedman, is a monetary phenomenon. When we talk about inflation, it's a money issue. So even if these fiscal interventions are very laudable, they must be coupled with the right monetary policies. So the central bank must put in measures, be transparent, and have the political will to drive the monetary policies. Because there's a difference between having, implementation, carving up the monetary policy, but there's a difference between that and also implementing those policies, having the political will, and it's what the flow of money must be controlled. Because if we do all of this and the flow of money is not controlled, and I like what you said, that most times always said that the amount of money in population, in circulation, sometimes the volume is outside of the formal sector. But the truth is, the money, now that you have inculcated the fintechs into the financial and the fiscal space in terms of the taxing them, definitely, and you have a lot of people, even those in the formal sector use the OPay, they use the banks that do that, they use all of that. So it's easy to control the money in circulation better than it used to be in the last 2 decades. So it means that what you have said, the fiscal policies must go on in hand with the monetary policy. And the government must be transparent, must be matured, and have the political will to follow through in the implementation of the monetary policy and the fiscal policy. Okay.
Harrogate, founded in 2008 out of a desire to build transgenerational structures for organizations, institutions and organizations, and public sector ministries and agencies. Is that we do not just work for you, we work with you. For example, after sourcing talent that will help the new hire, settling into robust leadership, development programs. We are technical experts in advising and supporting institutions on strategy and leadership, artificial intelligence, strategic human resource management, public sector reform, finance, audit and tax, FAT, and strategic communications. We do all this and more out of a desire to transform nations through institutions and organizations. For further inquiries, email contact at thearrowgate.org or call +234 810 999 6866 +234 807 957 4151 and +161 0504 6026 www.thearrowgate.org. Arrowgate, building to endure and transforming nations through institutions and organizations.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shoyebo. I've told you,
you're welcome.
This Shoyebo is always an interesting and enlightening session with him. Okay, thank you so much. If you're just joining us, listeners, is still fiscal interventions and economic growth on Arrowgate Radio Communications, and I have with me Dr. Shoyebo. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Shoyebo. Then I want to go further to look at the estimations from the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. Now, according to the IMF, they have estimated that the reforms could boost revenue by 4.2%, of the GDP in the long run. However, they also caution that there won't be immediate gains in this year, the year 2025. So in the long run, it could boost by 4.2%, but in the short run, at least this current year, there won't be immediate gains. So what implications does this delayed yield, have for budget planning, especially given the projected deficit and persistent expenditure pressures in the Nigerian economy?
Thank you very much. Ordinarily, from our elementary economics, we are meant to understand that there's always a lag in government and reform, government rules, and their full effectiveness or feeling them in the economy. The delayed fiscal gains means Nigeria must maintain short to medium term borrowing strategies, potentially relying on concessionary loan or asset-backed financing. Because a 4.2% gain is substantial. We are talking about 18 trillion annually. But if there is in the short run, if you don't have enough windfall for the government, or let me put it this way, the absence of short-term windfalls by the government to be prudent in terms of medium-term expenditure framework can spell doom for the economy. It will require prioritizing capital projects that have high multiplier effect, and also minimize our recurrent expenditure that keep on growing annually, as well as that will force us to enhance debt transparency and their sequencing. This is because most times debt is not the problem, it is the conditionalities, it is the terms and conditions that the lenders will give to the borrower to ensure the payment of their money. And that is why, remember, we're calling the IMF debt a case of debt for African countries. So we must get it right in terms of which kind of debt will help us solve the particular problem. And in this era, it's not at all time we have to go outside the shop to get this money. We have to tell ourselves the basic truth. So additionally, the delayed necessitate more realistic budget benchmarking, more realistic one. In terms of maybe, majorly we discuss on oil prices, production estimate, so that we will not be running into the problem of mid-year financing gaps. According to the IMF, I remember that it was said that Nigeria risks fiscal slipping if reform expectations are not met with adequate stopgap measure or bridging mechanism, such as cash flow forecasting, contingency expenditure planning, and even supplementary budget. But the question is that we should be mastering the process involved in budgeting. We always have budget cycle. Must we always have overlap? Must we always have supplementary budget? There is a need for us to be more proactive in this area, so that to a large extent in meeting reality, so that we will not be having problem that will force us to take some hard-headed decision for our citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shoyebo, and I do agree with you. Yes, there will be lags, definitely the period between when you introduce a policy, when you feel within then to when you feel the effect of those policies. And in the meantime, we have said that in order to bridge it in the short run, that government should prioritize capital projects, and we should reduce when necessary our recurrent expenditure. In fact, we always say that most times when you have a lot of recurrent expenditure, they're not going to turn into capital gains for you, investment, expansion for you. So definitely we need to reduce that as in governance. And you also mentioned debt transparency. Well, I want to stress that out. Okay, but yes, and also I also understand the fact that anytime we are going out to get this fund, we need to look and evaluate debt, the terms and conditions well. And one thing about saying we have to look at it holistically is that the mastering of the budget process, the budget planning, because even at the micro level, most times you don't want to always have supplementary budget. Most times you don't want to always have budget deficit. Even if it's not surplus, you want to make sure it's balanced, where your projected revenue matches your estimated expenditure. Okay, and people have always argued that the macro level is more complex, so it's not always easy to plan it that way. But I also believe that you can get better over the years, such that you can also minimize that discrepancy. So even if the deficit will be like 20% this year, the next year, subsequent year, will be like maybe 2%, so that you get to a place where it is balanced, it cannot be budget surplus. Because if there is nothing like surplus, possibility of surplus, we don't have that word in our register. Okay, so I think that, like you said, we can actually get the more realistic budget benchmarking. Okay, and I do agree with that. But some people, let me just play the devil's advocate, some people could also say that there are also factors beyond the control of government that could also influence these decisions. What do you think? What's your opinion on this?
Let me put it this way. I remember a study we did in 2018, and I said, in Africa, where does the majority of our expenditure goes? And you agree with me that it's recurrent expenditure.
Exactly, I do.
So we asked question why, and we did a survey. We checked most big, or let me say large economy in Africa. Pick Egypt, pick South Africa, pick Nigeria, we pick Kenya, and we discovered that majority of them has as high as 32% of their recurrent expenditure on general administration. And I asked, we did a comparative compared to developed countries like US, UK. Of course, this country has as low as 5-7%. And we came to a conclusion, come on, I think government expenditure is one of the regulatory tools in Africa. Because government believe that there is a large chunk of unemployment, a large chunk of mismanagement that they need to continuously finance so that they can exert control in Africa. Just as I was discussing with a colleague of mine, and we said, do you know what makes some region to be prosperous than another? It's because some region has been able to weaponize poverty. such that if you do not make people see that poverty is sitting deep in them, they will not even be bothering about anything. Imagine somebody cutting out down power line just to sell to scrap, and it's because the government have not been sincere in that a sustainable future. Why can't we are spending money on education? At the end of the result, we should produce world-class graduates that can help us to make a better decision in every aspect of life.
True.
That means the money we spend on them in 12 years will yield a multiplier effect. But not that we will continue the circle endlessly. It goes to tell us that, okay, I think every sector just be coming around, come and collect some money annually, and we increase it. In fact, in finance, that's what we call zero-based budget. You collect money, or you have to bring. So in finance, we have zero-based budget.
Okay, sir.
No department, no ministry deserve anything unless this for their request. At the end of the day, we're not ready.
We spend on becoming explainable. It is I, and I'm saying my general administration than my educational sector. Okay, I know that we said this is the right step in the right direction. I know that we also and see how can we get more efficient with our budgeting process. We'll be
Harmogate, founded in 2008 out of a desire to build transgenerational structures for organizations, institutions, and nations. We have worked with large businesses, international development organizations, and public sector ministries and agencies. Harmogate, our uniqueness is that we do not just work for you, we work with you. For example, we do not leave you to the task after sourcing talent that will help the new hire settle into robust leadership development programs. We are technical experts in advising and supporting institutions on strategy and leadership, artificial intelligence, strategic human resource management, public sector reform, finance, audit and tax, FAT, and strategic communications. We do all this and more out of a desire to transform nations through institutions and organizations. For further inquiries, email contact@thearmogate.org or call +234 810 999 6666 +234 807 957 4151 and +161 0504 6026 www.thearmogate.org. Harmogate, building to endure and transforming nations through institutions and organizations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Soyeba. But I also think that this zero-based budget is fine. How realistic is not the question. And I like the findings from your from the survey you carried and the research. I would get the details from you so I can also study it. Yes, we know that for most African, maybe particularly African countries, that what we spend on recurrent expenditure is not sustainable. It is high. It has to be brought down. There's even a quote I read someone I liked so much. He says that don't tell me what to prioritize as government. Show me your budget and I will tell you what to prioritize. So it means when I look at your budget, and I'm seeing a lot, like 32% of it on general administration, and I'm getting a 10% budget on education. Definitely what you are telling me as government is not by your mouth. It's saying I prioritize my general administration than my educational sector. Okay, I know that with time we'll get there, and like you said, this is the right step in the right direction. I know that we also look at budgeting as a separate episode and see how can we get more efficient with our budgeting process. in our Nigerian economy. Okay, we'll take a short commercial.
This is very, very clear because the reform
is globalization, and how does this align with global tax trends?
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Nigerian recent tax policy is a signal, let me call it a decisive and a signal shift from insular tax practices to global aligned standard. The one that embrace digital taxation, that also minimize effective tax rates, as well as cross-border transparency in a bid to stay competitive in a borderless economy. This is very, very clear because the reform is in tandem with several global tax trends, especially around digital taxation, tax-based erosion, and profit shifting. Because Nigeria is part of the OECD inclusive framework on base erosion and profit shifting, the reform demonstrates compliance with global efforts to ensure multinationals pay tax where economic activity occurs. And I'm sure the company, based on the country of residence, will be forced to obey the law of the land, while the country is working towards implementing Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 of the Global Minimum Tax Proposal, which seek to address tax challenges arising from digitalization of the economy. So this way, Nigeria is becoming a more advanced tax nation that will comply with global tax practices by adopting e-tax in terms of e-invoicing, digital tax filing, as well as cross-border tax cooperation mechanism that align with various international body recommendations such as the IMF standard for emerging markets. These measures reflect a growing understanding of the modern economy, and it will help us to harmonize our practice with global norms while protecting and enhancing our domestic revenue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shoyebo. So for those that have been asking something, for those who have been looking at it, that are we aligned with global tax trends? Yes, this reform, it's aligned with the global tax trend. Dr. Shoyebo has told us that in areas of digital taxation, the tax-based erosion, the profit shifting, we are aligned with this. And I also like the fact that we talk about the cross-border transparency, and also the fact that multinationals would have to, pay tax, in the countries where economic activities are taking place. Okay, so it means if your economic activities are taking place in Nigeria and you have majority of your income coming from here, Dr. Shoyebo, so Nigerian government would have to tax. If you have that profit coming from us, you will take part of it, in the country. And I also think that this would help not just improve economic growth, but also would have a lot in terms of infrastructure development across various sectors. And if this can be done, I also feel that it will be in the right step towards achieving economic development in Nigeria. Am I right, Dr. Shoyebo? Or do you have contrary?
Exactly, ma'am. Yes. if the government receive the money and they channel it with sincere intention to the most appropriate or the most deserving sector in the economy, it will bring about improvement, expansion, and our movement towards prosperity in the economy.
I like that. So so that means I always like to use the word political will a lot. Okay, and I know that Dr. Shoyebo likes to just hit it on the head to say transparency. Yes, we must be transparent. You must have the political will, and that also speaks to what you have said, that we must, invest. We must give it to the most deserving sector. Investing in various sectors, so it can't be the same amount of investment across various sectors in order to achieve economic development, and we cannot be sentimental about it. And so it means that it doesn't have to do with region. If it's not so, to wrap up this beautiful discussion, Dr. Shoyebo, I promise our listeners there's always an interesting, engaging session with you. I've enjoyed myself. I've learned from you. So it's a valuable session with you. I would ask this last question for today's episode. Now, the recent reforms, I've looked at it, but one thing I've also noticed that it stops short of environmental levies on land taxes. So I want to ask what your opinion is. Do you think the next reforms should include new taxation